Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at an absolutely gigantic sauropod figure. You can see before you just part of the body. This is actually a Diplodocus, and it is huge, absolutely huge, or at least I believe it's meant to be a Diplodocus. They had released two different sizes of this figure. There was a smaller one, which I've actually reviewed a little while back. It was made by a company named Gosnell, and it was a really cool looking figure. And then there's also this larger version here, and it's kind of, sometimes it seems like it's labeled as an Apatosaurus, sometimes it seems like it's labeled as a Diplodocus. It seems more often it's labeled as a Diplodocus, so I'm going to go with the fact that it's a Diplodocus. But again, it was made by a company named Gosnell, and you can see there's a little tag here. This one appears to have been made by a company called Beryou. I've never heard of them, but interesting nonetheless, I guess. Regardless, we have this very cool looking figure to take a look at, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get a closer look at this enormous sauropod figure right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Diplodocus, you can see that the head sculpt is fairly nice, but has some pretty sloppy paint, especially in the eye. The eye area is really quite awful as far as that paint application goes, but you can see that for the most part the paint up here on the head looks okay, I guess. It's nothing major, nothing amazing, but it looks decent for what it is. You can also see the teeth are sculpted out inside the mouth there and painted fairly nicely. You also have a tongue inside the mouth that appears to be sculpted out in a decent fashion. It also includes a nice pinkish coloration in there, sort of a realistic looking coloration for the inside of the mouth. Overall, I feel like the paint it's a little sloppy as far as the head goes, but the sculpt has a decent appearance to it. Some fairly decent looking skin texture up here on the head. As we move down into the neck, you can see some ridges popping up here on the back, as well as some fairly decent looking skin texture yet again here on the neck region. You can also see the throat, and there is a nice little kind of an orangish brown here in the throat region. Once you get to the underside of the throat, though, it appears to be kind of smooth as far as the actual texturing goes, but it still looks fairly decent as we run down the neck. Really nice kind of sculpting of the overall neck and the structure of the neck. It's just that the actual texturing of the skin is really, really fine. But up here you do have some larger scaling, which is a little hard to pick up on due to the somewhat lackluster paint application, but you can see that the neck does have a really nice appearance as it runs down the course of the entire body. It, of course, gets thicker as we lead to the base of the body, and then once you get here, you have lots of creasing in the skin where it connects to the body, and that does look really cool. Definitely a very nice touch and a nice dose of realism, I would think, for the way that the body would appear when it comes to the movement being shown in the sculpt. And then actually coming here into the body, you could definitely get a really nice sense of the shoulder blade there and a very nice sense of the musculature of this front leg. Again, being a dinosaur as large as this is, a Diplodocus is a very large animal. It's going to need some very muscular limbs to continue to withstand the weight of that body on its legs, and you can see that is in full force as far as the sculpt here. Really, really muscular looking front leg. As we move down here, you can see some nice creasing kind of going on in the elbow area. Very nice sauropod-like foot sculpt right here. Beautiful detailing on there. You also have a nail over here. It's kind of nicely painted, sort of. It actually looks like quite a bit of it is missed, but it's a very solid line appearing as though that's the end of the claw. Nice grayish coloration on it. So it's not perfect, but it doesn't look terrible. You can also see a little hint of like some orangish browns throughout the figure, and then blue is the majority of the color, it seems, for the dinosaur. And you can see some more really nice skin texturing going on throughout the entire stomach region of this dinosaur. Very nice scale detail the higher we get into the back, up into the spine area. As we move over here, you can pick out the hip bone here, and again, some decent looking musculature of the rear leg. Beautiful scale detail as we move down that rear leg, and then we get down into that rear foot sculpt, which also looks pretty nice. Nicely painted nails as well with that dark gray. And then coming back up into the tail, you have a lot more kind of skin folding, skin wrinkling going on right here. As we lead out into the tail transitions from that blue to an orange, which I am not a big fan of at all. I think the orange coloration on it is way too bright and very unrealistic, but you can see that the scale detail actually pops really nicely with the orange coloration. Helps to really make that detail shine a lot more, I think, and you can really see how nice that detailing is. As we move out the entire length of the tail, which it's a pretty long tail, we continue to go out to that very long tail's tip, and you can see out here that it does end without any type of ridges or anything. It just kind of transitions away, but it looks pretty nice sculpt-wise. If we look at the underside again, you can see some decent detail, but for the most part it's kind of like muted in certain areas. Like you can actually see that it's fairly muted right here, but then once we get into the stomach region, it looks fairly decent. I will say that it looks nice right there, and then we continue to move out the length of the underside, and the detail does pick back up, but certain areas just seem a little bit muted. Again, the figure's a little bit too big to really maneuver around here, so it's kind of hard to actually get some nice shots of it, but you can see the head sculpt over here. Again, really sloppy paint, but a decent looking sculpt. We move down the neck. Again, the ridges run along the spine the entire way. Very nice looking sculpt and detail here in the neck region of this dinosaur, and you get down into those creases right there as we reach into the body at the base of the neck. I really like the detailing here as far as like that musculature on this side and the shoulder blade and everything, and how it shines through the sculpt there. Very nice sculpt here on the leg, just like we had on the previous side, except this leg is picking up off the ground, but the nail appears to be painted better on this side. Yeah, definitely better on this side than what we see over here, so that's a plus. But again, the detailing in the stomach region looks really nice over here. Very nice skin textured appearance to the entire stomach region of the dinosaur. Lots of really nice skin folds and everything. You can see how the skin is wrinkling as the body's being pushed into due to the legs kind of pushing into the body, and the positioning of the legs as they're taking steps forward. And you can also see the rear leg and how nice that looks. You have a very nice foot sculpt again with some nicely painted nails. And then we run out the length of the tail. Again, this dinosaur is wreaking havoc on my backdrop currently due to it being bent in that position. The head almost keeps biting the backdrop and trying to pull it down. But you can see some really nice sculpt and detail, nice skin wrinkles and everything back here as we transition from the body into the tail, and then we run out the length of that very, very long tail. Yet again, that very bright orange tail. But the tail being so long is really cool. Definitely gives the entire figure an extremely striking appearance, and definitely a really cool looking Diplodocus figure overall. So as far as a size on this figure goes, this is going to be a task for sure, because again, the figure is huge, and I will show you kind of a more full-bodied look at the figure here in a minute. But again, it's so big right now, it's just so hard to get into frame. But we're going to go from the head, we'll bring the body out here, and the tail is curved in an upward fashion. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is currently. So we're actually going to measure it, I think, from up here. It's just really, really complicated to get a measurement on screen. So with the tail being bent in an upward position, for the length that it is at, you're looking at around 21.5 inches or about 55 centimeters, somewhere in that range. Now, of course, if the tail was stretched out straight, that would be much, much different, and it would be extremely long in comparison to the length that we currently have. But as far as a height goes, to the top of the head, you are looking at about 11 inches or 28 centimeters, and then the top of the tail, which you're not currently going to be able to see, but I will measure to the top of the tail and you just won't be able to notice it right now. It is at about 15 inches or around 38 centimeters, almost on the dot. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon next to our absolutely ginormous Diplodocus figure here, and you can see that this figure is huge in comparison to these. Again, there are two different sizes for this sauropod figure. I had purchased the smaller version a while back, and I did want to get a hold of this larger version, but I just didn't pull the trigger on it for quite some time. But now that I actually have it here, I'm really psyched about it, because even though the paint job is pretty bad, the sculpt is quite nice, and the size is extremely impressive. And you should have a pretty good idea of that next to these figures right here. And then for another size comparison, here is the previous Diplodocus figure that I had reviewed next to this current one. And you can really see what the size difference is between the two right here. The previous one I had repainted, so this of course is not the way it looked when it first came. It had kind of crummy paint on it like this larger version currently does, but you can definitely see that there is a large size difference between the two. However, I think they look really cool, and definitely something I'm probably going to be repainting is this larger version. I don't know if I'll keep it exactly the same as that smaller version, or if I'll just make it kind of like a more adult type look, but regardless, the two do look really cool together, and both are definitely quite nice looking Diplodocus figures. So this Diplodocus from the company Beryou, again, I've never heard of them, But the figure as a whole is quite nice, I will say that. It's just not very nice in the paint department. But sculpt-wise, the sculpt does sport some pretty nice detailing, nothing over the top, but there's definitely some really nice scale details, some pretty nice looking skin folds. I really do quite like the way that the neck is sculpted. As you can see, a lot of the structure of the dinosaur throughout the neck region, they've done a good job of sculpting all of that out. I like the nice ridges that run along the back, and for the most part, the sculpt overall, I think, does include some really nice detail and is immense in size, and I think that is definitely one of the things I like the most about it, is just how impressive the figure is in the size department, because it is massive, truly a large sauropod figure, and something that I feel like you just really need to get in hand to truly appreciate how large the figure actually is. The only real downside that I can think of to the figure is the fact that it is a really bad looking paint job. I don't like the coloration of the figure at all. I feel like, for the most part, the colors they've used look okay-ish in the front of the dinosaur with the kind of bluish coloration, but then once it transitions to that orange tail, it looks awful. That orange is way too bright and definitely is an eyesore on the figure. However, when I had originally seen the images of the figure in the listing, I actually purchased this from Aliexpress, but when I had seen the original figure in the listings, there was a little bit of difference to the color scheme. I felt like it looked a bit more natural, and there was actually some variations and like some designs of blue on the neck, but that is not present here on the actual factory released version, which I feel like is definitely a downside, because I was kind of enjoying that design on the neck. I thought it looked pretty nice and had me tempted to keep the figure in its original paint scheme as opposed to repainting it. But now actually having the figure here in hand and noticing that that little design is missing, I 100% intend on repainting this at some point. There was actually also another version of this figure that had a really nice looking paint scheme, and the original version that I had seen when I first saw the listing for this on eBay about probably like months and months ago, maybe closing in on a year ago, when I had originally noticed this figure, there was this really beautiful painted version, and you can see here it was a really nice looking figure, and I really wish this variant was available to buy, because I actually quite like the paint scheme on that one. But unfortunately, it's not. We have this version, and it looks sort of okay in certain parts as far as the paint goes, but for the most part the paint is pretty sloppy and not really all that appealing looking. There's a few different tones of color, but nothing I would really say is all that great, and for the most part the paint is a downside on the figure. Sculpt-wise, it's really nice. Size-wise, it's extremely impressive. Paint-wise, it's pretty bad. But if this is something that you would like to pick up, make sure you head to the description, because I will have a link there to Aliexpress where I purchased mine, and you can pick up yourself this absolutely gigantic Diplodocus figure today. So make sure you check the description, go buy this very large sauropod, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.